Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 Vaccine in Overview. This is a Part 4 of the Part 7 series of Road to a Vaccine for COVID-19, brought to you by HealthyRN Ways. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine against the coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, may be behind some of its competitors, but the company is moving forward with positive results and expects to seek emergency use authorization from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, in the coming weeks. The company is working with its pharmaceutical arm Janssen to develop the vaccine under the project names Ensemble 1 and Ensemble 2. The company enrolled participants for its late stage in September, and tested its vaccine with 2 different doses. How it works: Johnson & Johnson's vaccine is being studied as a single and 2-dose adenovirus-based vaccine. It is an experimental viral vector vaccine that uses a weakened live pathogen, adenovirus, as the delivery method, vector, for transporting a recombinant vaccine for COVID-19. Recombinant vaccines use a small piece of genetic material from the virus to trigger an immune response. This genetic material for COVID-19 does not replicate in the body. A specific piece of the virus can be targeted, and recombinant vaccines are common and generally safe to use in a large population of people, even those with chronic health problems or who are immunocompromised. There can be some drawbacks to recombinant vaccines. One example is that booster shots may be required over time. Examples of recombinant vaccines are pneumococcal vaccines and vaccines for meningococcal disease. The science behind recombinant adenoviral vector vaccines has been around for a long time, but the only commercially available adenovirus-based vaccine is a rabies vaccine for animals. Adenovirus-based vaccines may also pose some problems in that the adenovirus is so common that the vaccine may not be as effective once booster doses are given, or that some people may already have immunity to the virus used in the vaccine. How effective is it? Johnson & Johnson announced that its single-dose vaccine was 66% effective at preventing moderate to severe disease from COVID-19 and 85% effective at preventing severe disease. This effectiveness in the Phase 3 trial was reached 28 days after vaccination. The efficacy against moderate to severe COVID-19 infection varied by region in the trial. It was 72% in the United States, 66% in Latin America, and 57% in South Africa. The vaccine was also found to be fully protective against hospitalization and death, and the protection against severe disease included multiple variants of COVID-19, including the B.1.351 variant found in South Africa. When will it be available? The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is still being studied in clinical trials, and the company is preparing to file for emergency use authorization from the FDA for its single-dose vaccine. If authorized, it may be made available in the coming weeks. The trial had a temporary delay in October when it paused for an unexplained illness, although no specific details were provided about what happened due to patient privacy. Regulators determined that the event was not related to the vaccine and the trial was safe to resume. The company hasn't announced a release date yet, but the company is already taking reservations for orders of the vaccine if approved. Johnson & Johnson has a contract with the US government for 100 million doses, the equivalent of $10 per dose, and the option to purchase an additional 200 million doses if the vaccine receives emergency use authorization. It is way cheaper than the others vaccine that was released recently. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, is leading vaccination efforts, and all orders of COVID-19 vaccines, regardless of the manufacturer, will go through the agency. CDC is overseeing the distribution of vaccines. CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, has made recommendations on how to prioritize vaccine supplies, but it can vary by state during distribution. Healthcare workers and people living in long-term care facilities are the first to receive the vaccines, and additional priority groups include essential workers, people aged 65 and older, and people with high-risk medical conditions. Johnson & Johnson's vaccine will be the first COVID-19 vaccine to be given in just one dose. The CDC estimated that it will take several months before the supply of vaccines catches up to the demand. Guidance on who will receive the vaccine and when will be updated as supplies become available. Although little information is available on the specifics of when everyone will receive the vaccine and where they can get it, state and local health departments will be coordinating efforts to distribute doses of the vaccines as they become available. The vaccine should be available both in physician offices and retail locations like pharmacies that administer other vaccines. How much will a COVID-19 vaccine cost? Once the vaccine is available, any doses purchased by the US government will be free to its citizens. While the vaccine itself is free, the facility or agency that offers the vaccine may charge a fee for administration. Public health programs and insurance plans are expected to reimburse patients for any costs associated with COVID-19 vaccination, but not much information has been made available yet. Who can get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? Early vaccine efforts for most COVID-19 vaccine candidates are focusing on adult populations, with vaccine options for children and teens expected later in 2021. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is no exception. It's being tested in adults aged 18 and up with significant representation of individuals over age 60. There are no updates yet on other specific groups for the vaccine. Side effects and adverse events. In every clinical trial, participants are asked to record any reactions they have after receiving a medication or vaccine. Adverse reactions are considered to be medication reactions directly caused by a vaccine, whereas a side effect is a physical reaction to a medication. Initial safety information released for the vaccine shows that the most common reactions after the vaccine was administered included injection site pain, fatigue, headache, muscle aches. Additional information, including details on the prevalence and duration of side effects, is likely to be included when the final trial report is published. Funding and development. Johnson & Johnson is co-funding the development of the vaccine as part of Operation Warp Speed, a public-private partnership initiated by the US government to facilitate and accelerate the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, manufacturing, and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, with funding from the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, BARDA, a U.S. government program aimed at furthering the manufacture and distribution of vaccines to fight COVID-19. Johnson & Johnson said $1 billion has been invested. Early data shows Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine produces is 66% effective. The latest results from a Phase 3 clinical trial showed Johnson & Johnson's one-shot coronavirus vaccine is 66% effective against moderate to severe COVID-19. The results are reflective of the vaccine's effectiveness globally, and show levels of protection are different around the world. While the vaccine was 72% effective among participants in the US, it was only 57% effective among participants in South Africa, where a highly transmissible SARS-CoV-2 variant first emerged. Notably, nobody in the clinical trial needed to be hospitalized for COVID-19, and nobody died of the disease. While the overall effectiveness is lower than the 95% demonstrated by both Moderna and Pfizer, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine brings with it two promising factors that Moderna's and Pfizer's two-dose vaccines do not have. The first being that healthcare facilities will face less logistical planning when administering a one-dose versus a two-dose vaccine. The vaccine can also be kept in the refrigerator for 3 months, as opposed to Moderna's and Pfizer's vaccines, which must be stored in a freezer up until use, making preservation challenging for some healthcare facilities. Earlier this month, results from Phase 1/2 clinical trials indicated that the company's vaccine-induced immune responses against SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, in both young and elderly participants. Johnson & Johnson randomly assigned healthy adults between the ages of 18 and 55 and those 65 and older to receive either a high or low dose of the vaccine, or a placebo. A select group of participants in the 18 to 55 cohort received a second dose of the vaccine. In total, the trial included 805 participants. Most of the volunteers produced detectable neutralizing antibodies, which researchers believe play an important role in defending cells against the virus, after 28 days, according to the trial data. By day 57, all volunteers had detectable antibodies, regardless of vaccine dose or age group, and remained stable for at least 71 days in the 18 to 55 age group. The company is working with its pharmaceutical arm, Janssen, to develop the vaccine. What is an immune response? Developing an immune response is a necessary step in the process of creating vaccines. When it is introduced to a new virus, the immune system will respond by employing a number of germ-fighting tools needed to get over the infection. After the infection clears up, the immune system will remember what it learned about how to protect the body against that disease, and employ that against any future infections. Your immune system protects you against disease. When the immune system, composed of various organs, recognizes a particular germ, e.g. bacteria, viruses, as foreign, it launches antibodies that help destroy the germ. This process is referred to as B-cell immunity. T-cell immunity, on the other hand, occurs when the immune system remembers a particular germ and destroys it before it can make you sick again. Vaccines operate similarly, except they are designed to imitate an infection, meaning the immune system remembers and protects without a person becoming ill in order to do so. Minor symptoms may occur as a result of a vaccine. Johnson & Johnson's early results. In October, Johnson & Johnson announced early results showing that a single dose of their vaccine could induce antibodies in 97% of study participants that effectively neutralized the virus in the laboratory, but the company still required additional information on the effectiveness of the vaccine. They experienced a setback in their trials when a participant experienced an unexplained illness. No specific details were provided about what happened due to patient privacy. Regulators determined on October 23 the event was not related to the vaccine and the trial was safe to resume. Evaluating safety, participants in all three groups, high dose, low dose, and placebo, of the clinical trials reported mild symptoms, including headache, fatigue, nausea, myalgia, muscle pain, pain at the injection site. Adverse reactions were less common in the older age group. In the case of the participants who received the two-dose regimen, fewer reactions occurred after the second dose. 5 participants experienced more serious symptoms, with one participant visiting the hospital for a fever associated with vaccination. The participant recovered within 12 hours. The remaining 4 cases were confirmed to be unrelated to the vaccine. Next steps. Johnson & Johnson is on target to deliver 1 billion doses of its vaccine by the end of this year. The company receives an emergency use authorization, EUA, from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA. It is still too early to say specifically how many doses would be available in March. Before moving forward with an EUA, the FDA requires a follow-up of at least 2 months of safety data on half of the study participants, a threshold Johnson & Johnson crossed earlier this month. If the single-dose vaccine is shown to be safe and effective, the company expects to submit an application for emergency use authorization with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration shortly afterward, with other regulatory applications around the world to be made subsequently. We are aiming for 1 billion doses in 2021. If it is a single dose, that means 1 billion people. But it will be in a ramp-up throughout the year. It's a few weeks too early to be giving final numbers on what we can launch in the first couple months. How the Johnson & Johnson vaccine works. Johnson & Johnson is testing a coronavirus vaccine known as JNJ-78436735 or AD26, CoV-2s. Clinical trials showed that a single dose of the vaccine had an efficacy rate of up to 72%. Janssen Pharmaceutica, a Belgium-based division of Johnson & Johnson, is developing the vaccine in collaboration with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. A piece of the coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is studied with proteins that it uses to enter human cells. These so-called spike proteins make a tempting target for potential vaccines and treatments. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is based on the virus's genetic instructions for building the spike protein. But unlike the Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna vaccines, which store the instructions in single-stranded RNA, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses double-stranded DNA. DNA inside an adenovirus. The researchers added the gene for the coronavirus spike protein to another virus called adenovirus 26. Adenoviruses are common viruses that typically cause colds or flu-like symptoms. The Johnson & Johnson team used a modified adenovirus that can enter cells but can't replicate inside them or cause illness. Vaccine comes out of decades of research on adenovirus-based vaccines. In July, the first one was approved for general use, a vaccine for Ebola, also made by Johnson & Johnson. The company is also running trials on adenovirus-based vaccines for other diseases, including HIV and Zika. Some other coronavirus vaccines are also based on adenoviruses, such as the one developed by the University of Oxford and AstraZeneca using a chimpanzee adenovirus. Adenovirus-based vaccines for COVID-19 are more rugged than mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. DNA is not as fragile as RNA, and the adenovirus's tough protein coat helps protect the genetic material inside. As a result, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine can be refrigerated for up to 3 months at 36 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. Entering a cell, after the vaccine is injected into a person's arm, the adenoviruses bump into cells and latch onto proteins on their surface. The cell engulfs the virus in a bubble and pulls it inside. Once inside, the adenovirus escapes from the bubble and travels to the nucleus, the chamber where the cell's DNA is stored. The adenovirus pushes its DNA into the nucleus. The adenovirus is engineered so it can't make copies of itself, but the gene for the coronavirus spike protein can be read by the cell and copied into a molecule called messenger RNA, or mRNA. Building spike proteins. The mRNA leaves the nucleus, and the cell's molecules read its sequence and begin assembling spike proteins. Some of the spike proteins produced by the cell form spikes that migrate to its surface and stick out their tips. The vaccinated cells also break up some of the proteins into fragments, which they present on their surface. These protruding spikes and spike protein fragments can then be recognized by the immune system. The adenovirus also provokes the immune system by switching on the cell's alarm systems. The cell sends out warning signals to activate immune cells nearby. By raising this alarm, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine causes the immune system to react more strongly to the spike proteins. When a vaccinated cell dies, the debris contains spike proteins and protein fragments that can then be taken up by a type of immune cell called an antigen-presenting cell. The cell presents fragments of the spike protein on its surface. When other cells called helper T cells detect these fragments, the helper T cells can raise the alarm and help marshal other immune cells to fight the infection. Making antibodies, other immune cells, called B cells, may bump into the coronavirus spikes on the surface of vaccinated cells, or free-floating spike protein fragments. A few of the B cells may be able to lock onto the spike proteins. If these B cells are then activated by helper T cells, they will start to proliferate and pour out antibodies that target the spike protein. Stopping the virus, the antibodies can latch onto coronavirus spikes, mark the virus for destruction and prevent infection by blocking the spikes from attaching to other cells. Killing infected cells, the antigen-presenting cells can also activate another type of immune cell called a killer T cell to seek out and destroy any coronavirus-infected cells that display the spike protein fragments on their surfaces. Remembering the virus, Johnson & Johnson is testing a single dose of the vaccine, unlike the 2-dose coronavirus vaccines from Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca. But because Johnson & Johnson's Phase 3 trial results have not yet been released, researchers don't know how well the vaccine might work, or how long its protection might last. If the vaccine is effective, it's possible that the number of antibodies and killer T cells will drop in the months after vaccination. But the immune system also contains special cells called memory B cells and memory T cells that might retain information about the coronavirus for years or even decades. Vaccine timeline: January 2020 Johnson & Johnson begins work on a coronavirus vaccine. March Johnson & Johnson receives $456 million from the United States government to help develop and produce the vaccine. July a Phase 1/2 trial begins. Unlike the clinical trials for other leading vaccines, The trial involves 1 dose, not 2. A dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. August, the federal government agrees to pay Johnson & Johnson $1 billion for 100 million doses, if the vaccine is approved. September, Johnson & Johnson launches a Phase 3 trial. October 8, 2020, the European Union reaches a deal to obtain 200 million doses. October 12, 2020, the company pauses its Phase 3 trial to investigate an adverse reaction in a volunteer. October 23, 2020, the trial resumes. November 16, 2020, Johnson & Johnson announces a second Phase 3 trial to observe the effects of 2 doses of their vaccine, instead of just 1. December 17, 2020, Johnson & Johnson announces its Phase 3 trial is fully enrolled, with around 45,000 participants. January 2021, preliminary results from the Phase 3 trial are expected in January. The company is aiming to produce at least 1 billion doses this year. January 13, 2021, Johnson & Johnson expects to release trial results in as little as 2 weeks. But the company is falling behind on its original production schedule. February 2021, if trials show the vaccine is effective, the company could apply for emergency use authorization from the Food and Drug Administration in February. Johnson & Johnson is seeking FDA authorization for its vaccine. Johnson & Johnson has applied for emergency use authorization from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, for its single-dose COVID-19 vaccine. Upon authorization of our investigational COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use, we are ready to begin shipping. With our submission to the FDA and our ongoing reviews with other health authorities around the world, we are working with great urgency to make our investigational vaccine available to the public as quickly as possible. The FDA is now scheduled to meet February 26, 2021 for an all-day meeting to discuss the vaccine candidate. The agency is expected to issue authorization within days of that meeting. Johnson & Johnson revealed Phase 3 trial data on January 29, indicating that its vaccine was 66% effective overall at preventing moderate to severe COVID-19, 28 days after inoculation. Key takeaways: Johnson & Johnson's one-shot coronavirus vaccine produced an immune response against COVID-19 in clinical trials. Clinical trials say the vaccine is 66% effective at preventing moderate to severe disease 28 days after vaccination, and 72% effective in the US. The one-shot vaccine would be an asset to the current US vaccination process, which currently requires logistical planning for vaccines that require 2 doses. If the company's vaccine is authorized by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, it would be the 3rd vaccine approved for use in the U.S. This is the Part 4 of Series 7 of Road to Vaccine of COVID-19. Please watch the Part 1, 2, 3 series on my previous videos, like, share and subscribe to my channels for more videos. Thank you for watching, see you on my next video. Ma Salama.